Peg is my hero because she has worked all her life doing history while I spent all my life recording history. And we finally got a chance to sit down together and discuss her life so that I could know her history. And that's why she's my queer hero. I love her.
About $8,000 last year.
Woohoo! You're rich. All right. That looks pretty good. All right, Peg.
Okay. Do you want me to say my whole full formal name?
Sure.
You know, rather than, you know, I was licensed as Peggy Hanley Hackenbrook, MD. I moved to Oregon in 1971, I think, to become a resident in psychiatry at OHSU. And the rest is history.
Yeah, history is what we're here to record.
Okay.
So, you're part of the LGBTQ community, correct?
I am.
And tell us a little bit about how you discovered that you were part of that community and when that happened.
Okay, all right. When, let's see, the first time I learned anything about homosexuality was in 1966 in my psychiatry class in second year medical school, when I learned that it was a very serious psychological problem which could not be cured, but should be treated. And I just so happened that I had met my first out lesbian woman then, and I was, really smitten for the first time in my life. But I was in medical school. I had decided I was going to be a doctor when I was 12 or 13. And I wanted to be able to do that and to be a normal person. So that was very scary to begin to realize that I was something that wasn't considered normal. And I had therapy for about 4 or 5 years to get rid of my homosexuality. And of course it didn't work, because it doesn't.
Right.
And but I learned that I also could be attracted to men, and I fell in love with and married a man, and we had a couple of children. As he says now, I was always in love with one woman or another the whole time we were together. We moved to Portland in '71, primarily because he was in art school, and so I got a job at OHSU, and at that time, one of the first things that really got me going on kind of a coming out path was feminist psychology, when I learned a lot about the influence of male-dominated thinking in psychology and psychiatry, and about sexism and all that stuff, and then also about the beginning of questioning, I think, well, it really wasn't the beginning of questioning, but in my circle, the beginning of questioning about homosexuality. And then in 1973 is when the first diagnostic change came in psychiatry to the ego-dystonic homosexuality, so that some homosexuality didn't have to be a disorder if it wasn't really making you in conflict with your ego, with your self-identity. And that was those two things together, the feminist psychology, actually the feminist spirituality as well, and the changing thinking in psychiatry. And then I became more and more aware of my own sexual interests, and eventually told my husband that I needed to act on those urges in me. And that was about in 1978, 79, something around there. And that was the same time that I found a little ad in the American Psychiatric News for the caucus of gay, lesbian, and bisexual psychiatrists who would be meeting at the annual meeting of the American Psychiatric Association. And that was the thing that threw open the doors, that there were other psychiatrists that were embracing being gay and lesbian and bi at that time. Not yet any transgenders among us in the group, but later on there are. So
Was that here in Oregon?
well, I came from Oregon to that. It was all over there were people from all over and it wasn't really organized in Oregon.
Okay.
But once I got involved nationally with that group, then myself and one or two other gay psychiatrists here in Portland organized the gay and lesbian psychiatrists here in Portland.
Does that still exist?
I don't believe so. I don't know. I really haven't been active in psychiatry for a long time, and in the gay and lesbian psychiatrist group for several decades.
Okay.
Actually.
Well, so let's go back to those several decades when you were involved. Let's see, this was in the 79, 80s?
So, yes, I really got involved in the early 80s. And a couple of things. I got involved in the National Association of Gay and Lesbian Psychiatrists. And I represented the Association of Gay and Lesbian Psychiatrists in the General Assembly of the American Psychiatric for a couple of years. And I was a member of the Oregon Psychiatric Association. And during those years, during the 80s, we had Measure 9 and Measure 13. I can't remember when Measure 8 was. I don't think I was out and involved in that. But those of us, so I got involved in a couple of things in the early 80s. One was teaching about a positive view of homosexuality in the medical school to the medical students, along with a couple of other gay physicians and gay psychiatrists and residents. And I also, during the No on 9 campaign, got involved with the People of Faith Against Bigotry and went out to speak against Measure 9. The other thing that I did early in the 80s was that I realized, number one, I came out as an open lesbian psychiatrist, and that I was interested in treating people or seeing clients that were gay. So the other thing that was happening at that time was that the Portland Town Council was our gay lesbian organization in town that, sponsored the Pride Parade, did whatever kind of organizing that we now have a number of organizations that do. It was called Portland Town Council. And one of the things that the Town Council wanted to do was to develop a mental health clinic for the gay and lesbian population, the community here. And so I was on the committee that hired the first director of that, and then I stayed on as the psychiatric consultant there. And that meant that I saw, I took the referrals from the counselors and it was called Phoenix Rising Clinic. I took the referrals of who needed to be seen by a psychiatrist, and that was pro bono work, which I loved. And I always had, being a good feminist and liberal, I always had a sliding fee scale, and wanted to offer my services to our community and beyond, other communities who couldn't afford the high psychiatric fees. Anyway, let's see. Back to...
We're in the 80s.
Yeah, so I wanted to say more about... So for a number of years I worked... I saw clients from Phoenix Rising, but I also was out there as an open lesbian psychiatrist and got referrals and started seeing people in the community as well. And then there were other gay and lesbian therapists, popping up, and especially women therapists and feminist therapists. And so we put together the Women's Therapy Project of kind of open women therapists, not all gay and lesbian, but a lot of us were a part of that, and learning more about homosexuality and gender issues and that sort of thing, and advertising that, and most of us working on a sliding fee scale.
Right.
So that proceeded, and then that proceeded through the 80s, and then I became more active in the back up again.
Okay.
In the No on 9 campaign and the No on 13 campaign, we went to the Oregon Psychiatric Association, myself and several of the other members of our psychiatric group, to lobby that the Oregon Psychiatric Association come out with a strong message against the discrimination about gays and lesbians, and we were successful in being able to play that part.
Wow.
In that.
Do you recall the date?
Well, whenever the No on 9 and No
Okay.
on 13 campaigns were.
So during that era?
Yeah.
Okay.
For both of those measures. I wasn't involved in Measure 8, so can't remember if they did that. And there were others. There were also some straight psychiatrists that were supporting us in that.
Thus our allies.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So how did the AIDS epidemic play into your life?
My connection with the AIDS epidemic was primarily in the national level of the gay and lesbian psychiatrist group. I was on the board the board, and we were pushing wherever we were pushing the American Psychiatric Association, who had people at high levels who could have influence in NIH and other, larger organizations to speak out about the kind of the discrimination that was happening against people, and we did some work to support the rapid development of treatment and not holding things back and that kind of thing. And on a personal level, that's probably also where I felt it the most, because for maybe I don't know, 8 to 10 years, maybe less than that, we had every national meeting, we had a memorial service for our members who had passed during the year, and that was where most of my social contact with the gay male world was happening. So that was where I was more active.
Did you see primarily women
In my practice?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I saw primarily women. But of course, yes, and in my whole practice as a women therapist, there are not a lot of men, especially back then, who wanted to come.
Well, that's intriguing, because what about the transgender? Did you have questioning older women or younger women that?
Oh, well, there was one really neat thing that happened actually in my training, which is that Ira Pauley, MD, who is on our picture board there in Q Center, is one of our heroes. He was a psychiatrist at OHE and one of my teachers, and so I early on got some education about transgender, and then when I was at the national, some of the members of the Association of Gay and Lesbian Psychiatrists were treating transsexual people back east in this positive understanding. This is a transition. This is not psychopathology. And so I then, by that point, I was early in my practice and started seeing people in my practice, and to help with their transitions, and to help, eventually with changes they needed. Oh well, some medication prescription, and making it so that, well, I think they had to prove that they'd had 2 years of psychotherapy and that kind of thing. Yeah, but I think that I started seeing transgender people shortly after I started in private practice.
And that was
77.
77.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. So, in your experiences here in Portland, were your clients younger or older? How did you relate to them? And what was the major questions that they usually had to be concerned about when they were talking to you? Were they feeling a mental illness issue, like they felt like they'd been put down so much that they needed to have some clairvoyance from you to think clearer, in the sense that it isn't a sin, it isn't wrong, etc.?
I would say that in the beginning, for sure, that was the big issue. That people came having lived with the stigma and feeling bad about themselves because of who they were and how they were, and so dealing with a lot of coming out issues and a lot of education of people that people didn't really know that there were all these studies and all this evidence that had gone back to decades before, that we're not sick. And so there was very often a lot of that kind of reassuring and helping with that, and also just really practical things, like young people who needed to leave their families, helping transition those things, meeting with PFLAG and teaching them about the kind of new thinking about homosexuality in
Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about your time with PFLAG, the time period when you got involved.
well, that was all in kind of the mid '80s and well, from kind of mid '80 to mid '90s, and I would say that we started it in the mid '80s, maybe around '83, '84, something like that.
How many people?
Would come.
Mm-hmm.
Oh gosh, sometimes we have over 100 people. We filled the fellowship hall at Westminster Presbyterian Church regularly.
All ages?
Of lesbians, women, yeah. We had childcare available. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
And what did you do?
we just had we had a presentation, usually some sort of panel discussion on whatever the topic was. Like I said, dating or lesbian families, being a lesbian mother, and that we had panels on the lesbians in the African American community. We had panels on lesbian music scene, just all kinds of topics. Right now I can't bring them all up. It's been a long time.
So it was really good group therapy for them.
Well, it wasn't really therapy. It was more like community building.
Well, yeah.
Is what it was.
But,
yeah, it was
yeah,
community
community
building.
building.
But since it was my belief was that I could see, and I certainly had experienced the effects of internalized homophobia. And I worked with internalized homophobia in my office every day, and how it affected whatever the lives of the gay and lesbian. I did have gay male patients as well. Mm-hmm. But anyway, yeah. So it did come with the idea that I really wanted to reinforce the idea that we are healthy people, and where to find yourself in the community, and to find actually a lot like LOCA, only for the whole spectrum of
And
the
LOCA is lesbians of a certain
age.
age, 55 plus.
Yes,
Okay.
right. Yeah.
So the 80s were good for you, you went into the 90s, then what happened?
Well, the 90s, the early 90s were, I kind of, well, tell you the absolute truth. 1992, I turned 50, and I knew that I did not want to be working past 62, and that I needed to make money in order to retire at 62. And so I focused much more on my own psychiatric practice, and still with everybody knew who I was, and with seeing the community and doing work with transgender and coming out and all that. But that's kind of where I went at that time.
Nothing wrong with that.
And also, raising my kids. Although they were getting pretty old by then, but yeah. Oh, speaking of kids, I mentioned that my ex-husband is gay, and so the kids always went to the gay pride parades with us and that kind of thing. And I'm very proud of my younger daughter, who went to Metropolitan Learning Center, the alternative school in Portland, in high school, and this would have been right around the early 90s, which I think was actually the No on 13 campaign. I think was right around in that time, something like that. because when she was at MLC, Scott Lively from the Oregon Citizens Alliance came and spoke to the students about their philosophy, and she stood up and came out as a daughter of gay and lesbian parents and kind of challenged him, and that was pretty neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there a support group of children? I know PFLAG's for parents supporting children.
Well,
Is there a children that support parents?
well, I think that the one that I was connected to was on the national level, and but here in town it was Love Makes a Family, and that was run by Bonnie Tinker, who is a wonderful leader in our community. And yeah, that got started in the late 80s and 90s too.
When did you get involved at Friendly House?
I got involved at Friendly House, just, let's see, when I turned 65, I'm now 73, so about 7 years ago, I realized something similar to what I had the inspiration in the 80s, that we didn't really know much about gay and lesbian aging, and that I didn't know much, and that so I decided to started. Well, maybe we'll have a little workshop on gay and lesbian aging, and in the process of that, I went to find out what were the services and groups already in Portland, and that's when I found what was then the
Gay and Gray?
Well, no, it was even before that. It was well, I can't remember, but anyway, it was the preamble to Gay and Gray, and so then I became interested in running a support group for LGBT people through Gay and Gray, and that's been running now for 7 years.
So you're still actively involved in a support group at
Right.
Friendly House?
Yes.
Through SAGE?
Through SAGE, yeah.
Wow.
And I still do a little bit at Q Center.
With Susan Cosin?
With Susan Cosin for the ERA program, but in the last year kind of cut back even more because of health issues.
So recently you got married.
Recently I got married, yes, in January of this year.
And you married Lee Meckler.
Melcher.
Lee Melcher.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone loves to know first crush. So how did you find her? And I think it has something to do with the Q Center, so I'll let you tell the story.
Yeah. I was co-facilitating the conversation on LGBT aging with Susan Cosin, and there was someone new in the group, and so I just, I needed to go up and say hello and introduce myself, and so I did. And from right off the bat, I loved her silver hair. But then I think it was right in that first conversation, she said that she was a goddess woman, and I've been the part of a goddess circle, lesbian goddess circle, since the early 80s as well. And I thought, wow, that's cool, because there aren't very many of us around. And but I was just, I was being the co-facilitator of the group, But then I I said, well, okay, so let's go out for coffee. And about 3 or 4 months later, I got around to making good on and saying, okay, let's go have lunch. And it was, the lunch lasted 4 hours, and we found that we had just an awful lot in common, not just the spirituality, which is very important, but yeah.
That poor Coke can is going to be squeezed
Oh,
to death
sorry.
with your excitement about talking about Lee. And I'm really happy to see that love does that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
in general, you just said you had some health issues. Do you care to share what's going on in your life?
Well, I was diagnosed in August with multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer, and on chemotherapy since then, and I'm doing okay and feeling pretty good, but I don't have a lot of energy and have the effects of the chemotherapy, and don't have great memory and stuff like that.
Well, I think you're doing pretty well with your memory at this moment.
Well, those things I can remember. It's the here and now, it's the aging thing. Yeah. But I don't have the extra energy that I've had for involvement in the community and for so many years. Yeah.
Well, that's the sage of aging.
That's right.
Is that you now get to enjoy other people caring for you and doing things for you and taking you places, and that's fun.
Yeah.
But what do you think your greatest memory of achievement with the LGBT community in Portland is? The one thing that just stands out.
I don't know that there's one thing, but I think that the thing, I guess, that I'm the most proud of actually was the Lesbian Forum. That was a totally new, different thing that I could do.
How did you get the word out?
Just out.
In the
newspaper.
In the newspaper.
Yeah.
Marty Davis at that time, or no?
No, at that time it could have been Renee LaChance, but I think it was actually even before Renee. That was. I really like to foster. I like conversation. I like to foster conversation, and help people meet each other, and I think that was kind of my biggest heart thing in the community.
Where do you think we are right now in the community?
Oh my goodness!
Since when you started?
Well, number one, we're huge, and we are really diverse. There are so many different us's that we don't even know who we all are. We are kind of and I think that there are so many different groups dealing with so many different aspects of our lives, of us. I think of us more almost like a United Nations, maybe. There's just so much diversity. There's so many different aspects of being who we are, and we share some things together. And I think that back in the 80s, and 90s, we really, and before, from maybe kind of like Stonewall on, we shared that overt oppression and stigmatization, and we're kind of breaking out of that, and so we were kind of at that kind of developmental level that we all more shared than we do then, and now there are so many different permutations on that.
Where do we need to go?
Boy, I still think that communication is the key. We need to come together and find out who we all are, to support and understand how we're different and that we don't need to all be the same, but we do need to embrace each other. You know, really those questions are, they're so big, I feel like.
Do you have any regrets?
Do I have any regrets about
Your contribution
my contribution?
to the LGBTQ community.
No. No.
So you feel pretty celebratory about all of what has happened. You feel good about yourself. And
Well, I feel like I played my little part, and it is, you know, and it was, you know, I just was really glad to contribute. I played my part, and I was glad to contribute, and that's what I hope to continue to do, but also pass things along.
yeah.
One of the thoughts that I had about now, which I expressed at a group at Q Center over a year ago when we were talking about housing, and I think we were also talking about, I think it might have been a conversation with the different age groups, and I said something about, you know, that we, the older folks, we really need the younger folks. We need you to care for us and about us, and we need you to be out there, you know, building community and carrying on and making things better. And I think folks are. Yeah. So.
What's your biggest goal with the rest of your life? What's one thing you would like to do?
A goal?
Uh-huh.
I would like to have a really wonderful marriage. That's something I haven't really achieved before. Even I've had other relationships. And I would like to die with a feeling of peace and, you know, satisfaction, gratitude.
Are you glad to call Portland home?
Oh, I love it. Yes.
Do you love the community that you're involved in?
Oh, yes.
Do you think that this community is probably, I'm being biased, let me rephrase that. Do you think this community is unique compared to other communities throughout the world?
Well, be honest, I don't have enough experience to really answer that. On the other hand, yes, every community is unique, but I like the values that our community has. Yeah.
Do we own the saying, keep Portland weird?
I don't know. I think that some of us, you know, some of us can identify with that and some of us don't, and I just want to embrace, you know, like kind of the, like I said, the United Nations of LGBT-ness in Portland.
I love that term, United Nations of Portland. That's great. So, all right, Peg, question. These are all like, have you written a book?
Have I written a book? No.
Do you ever plan to write a book?
No.
Are you in any of the medical books, articles that you've written, that you've done throughout your career
I have a couple
published?
of articles published
Are they
on psychotherapy with lesbians primarily.
Hi, I'm not very much of a technical person. In fact, part 3 of this is actually not available because it didn't record properly. But the reason why I think Peg should be nominated as the Queer Hero for 2016 is because she truly deserves it. And this interview that I've presented for the last 40 minutes doesn't even touch the fact that she has touched so many people in her life by her great and wonderful way of working with the LGBTQ community from the hardest time when it was still clinically a mental illness versus now where it's a pride thing, and I'm very proud of her, and I want you to nominate her. So there. This is my clip. This is Cindy Serndorf signing out. Bye.